Hey everyone.
Hey, Peter Parker. You got something for me?
I had to beat an old lady with a stick to get this.
Okay, send out the countdown clock. And here we go.
10, 9, 8, 7,
6,
5,
4,
3,
2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the Secrets to Surviving Alienation. Can never say that word. Alienation. Anyways, I'm Mr. X, and I am so glad that you guys can join us, even if you are not tuning in right now, because it's a little late, and with the holidays, things have been crazy with getting stuff out on time, and other projects were going on. So we're doing another documentary again. I believe I figured out the audio issue. I know last time we were having some. Um, and I didn't pre-screen this, so this is a new thing for me. I know the last one, some of you guys mentioned that it was strictly towards males, but in fact, it's kind of both genders that go through it. You know, so, anyways, you guys can follow us on. Let me put my eyeballs on because Mr. X is blind. All right, there we can see. You guys can follow us on Facebook.com/justice00045. That's 3 zeros. And Twitch TV/alienation81 and YouTube. It's right there on the screen. That's just a mouthful. If you want to support us, donate to PayPal to the PayPal name alienation816@gmail.com. And if you want to comment on the live stream, you have to go to streamyard.com/Facebook. And I will go ahead and put this on the comments so you guys can go ahead and see it. Oh, I have a viewer. Hello, person. Hi. What platform are you coming from? Oh, you're coming from Twitch. Yes, that is a mouthful to say for your username, so I apologize. I will not say that. This is about alienization. I know it's kind of different. I'm sorry I didn't see your comment. I was busy getting stuff set up. So, it's a global problem. It's how many people are watching? Just you right now. Usually I get most of my views off of Facebook afterwards. I'm glad I'm having a little interaction with you. But it's more of, we usually have live speakers and we've been having trouble getting some for a minute. So it's been, with COVID and what's it called? The holidays. It's been a little tough getting it. So I guess I have like 2 people watching now to answer your question directly. So without further ado, I am gonna shut the hell up and no, Twitch isn't my job. I I don't get paid for this. I also do a podcast called Secrets Untold. that's also about parental alienation. It's more about the personal stories. I usually get them off of Reddit. Sometimes I get stories from people that they write out or they record something. My actual job is I work for a floor cleaning company. I strip and wax floors, clean carpets, stuff like that, janitorial stuff. Um, I was a security guard before, and I was in the National Guard and Reserves for 9 years. So, uh, I do have another Twitch channel, username Dark1109, but I really don't have time to play the video games on there, and I don't really have strong enough computer. The most viewers I've ever had, I would say about 3K, but not on live. So it tends to vary. Yeah, like I said, I get most of my views off of Facebook. So, I mean, we've only been doing this, I want to say maybe a month or so. So, what part of the world are you from, viewer? Turn on the caps. You're in Cali. Huh. Well, never been to California. Uh, I've heard bad things about the laws. So it's just different. I live in Ohio. Not much to do here. A lot of city and then country. So, but dear viewer, I am gonna shut the hell up and start this documentary. Hmm. That is a little bit of a loaded question. I voted for Andrew Yang. I know Trump has done some good work, not a lot, but some. And Biden, I don't know too much about his policies, so I can't say I don't like the guy. I can't say I don't like Biden, but if I had my pick, I would get rid of all of Congress and just have Yang in there and let him pick people. It's a mess. Yep. I am diehard Yang gang. If Andrew Yang is gonna run again next year, not next year, but next 4 years, I'll vote for him. I honestly want to try to be his advisor, but there's probably somebody better for that job. So, yeah, Nate, small world. All right, well, dear viewer.
Every year, thousands of children find themselves caught in bitter custody disputes between their estranged parents. Many of these children will experience the turmoil, disruption, loss of trust, fear, and anger of suddenly finding themselves in a conflict of loyalty between their parents. Then, as so often happens, one parent begins the process of denigrating the other parent. They tell their children that the other parent is dead or no longer loves them. Sometimes children are whisked away to a distant place or even a foreign country. Parental alienation is but another form of child abuse. Already traumatized by the loss of one parent, these children now find themselves caught in an impossible situation from which they may never recover. Gone forever is their feeling of trust and intimacy. Gone forever is their sense of security and balance. Gone forever is their childhood.
The way it has affected my relationships is it's made me very conscious that the people who love you or whom you love are very capable of hurting you. My name is Anthony Francis Wakefield, known as Tony Wakefield by everyone, and we're in Mexico City. I was actually born in Atlanta. My mother's Mexican from Chiapas, the southernmost part of Mexico, the country. And my father's American. He was raised in Atlanta. They met in Atlanta, and I was born and lived there until I was like 3 years old. At which point, my father had this romantic idea of living in Latin America, and convinced or talked my mother into moving into Mexico. My father was like a hero to me. I really looked up to him. Growing up in Mexico, he was taller than most average men. He's a really, really tall man, robust. So I guess that enhanced the sense of he was like a super dad. He had a very successful job. He was also very tender, very loving and tender with me. The happiest period of my life was my childhood up until the time when I turned 10 years old. I think back of it as a very sunny. I think of sun. When my parents split up it became a very dark place.
What happened to me, being abducted and all the negative messages I got about my mom, this was serious, serious, serious child abuse. The sheer mental torture that I went through as a kid, the fear, and now looking back and seeing that I was manipulated by my dad in the way that I was for his own interests. I mean, this is pure child abuse. My name is Cecilia, and we're in Oslo, Norway, which is the place that I was abducted from as a 4-year-old child. I was born in 1970 in Denmark to an American father and a Norwegian mother. And then when I was 3, my parents separated. My mother came back to Norway, which is where she was from. She settled in Oslo with me. She brought me to Denmark quite a few times to visit my dad or to drop me off there to stay for a few weeks with my father. He came here to Norway a lot and visited, and it was very open. He'd come for dinner or stay for a few days, or he'd come and pick me up and we'd go on vacation for a week or 2 at a time together. So there's a very open kind of relationship. My mother wasn't trying to keep me from my father and wanted very much for me to have a good relationship with him. I loved him very much. I was very close to him and missed him very much. So she wanted to maintain that contact for me. I remember my parents fighting and wishing that they would stop. And they weren't even fighting. They weren't yelling or anything. But I could sense the tension and just wishing that it would stop and wishing that I could do something to make it stop.
Yeah, I don't think I wanted to be afraid of my father. I think that was a choice that was made by my mother, grandmother. My name's Thomas Ryan. We're in Edinburgh, Scotland. In May 1979, I was taken by my mother, my grandmother, my grandmother's husband, along with my younger brother, illegally from the state of Oregon to live in Scotland. That I was abducted by my mother for the purpose of preventing me ever seeing my father again. I was born in Eugene, Oregon, in America. I'd say the environment was middle-class suburban family. I had 2 older brothers and an older sister and a younger brother. My relationship with the rest of the family I would describe as what's considered a normal family relationship with brothers and sisters and mother and father. It was very much what I'd describe as the idea of an average family. Before my mother and father were having relationship problems, my recollection of my father was someone I was happy to spend time with and did spend a lot of time with him in what I would describe as a normal relationship. I can't really remember that much, really, specifically. You know, about that time, about just playing golf. I remember that, playing golf with him and caddying. I caddied for him. I became aware of some of the relationship difficulties between my mother and father from I was probably about 8 or 9. I remember them having arguments. The relationship difficulties between my mother and father were certainly inflamed by my grandmother's input. The result of that was a divorce, quite a confrontational divorce. During the divorce proceedings, my father had moved out of the family home. I was still living at the family home. My grandmother was spending a lot of time looking after us. My mother had been hospitalised. I seem to remember it being some sort of nervous problem. And during that time, I was looked after by my grandmother. This whole situation with my mother being in hospital and being ill was, the blame was put on my father for this, that he'd caused this by his behaviour. And I no longer wanted to play golf. I can't remember if that was something my father still tried to encourage, but I was reluctant. It was something that was clearly associated with him, so it was something that was, you know, why do you want to do that? And my father was being turned into a monster.
I was never aware of anything being wrong up until it happened. Somehow my sister knew, and I remember a couple times before my parents split up, my sister coming up to me, you know, she was 7, saying, "Oh, you know, mommy and daddy had a fight." I was also aware, maybe not consciously, but unconsciously, that my mother was a very difficult person to be with, too. That, you know, she had a temper. As I said, the fights that I remember her having with my father, it was always my father, you know, trying to placate, to make up, whatever. And those were the things I later on found out that killed the marriage. Yeah, my father was, you know, he put up with that. He just took too many of those situations. Remember my father packing up his suitcases. And then there was a thing where they said, well, but you're going to take a little vacation with your mother, right? With my mom. He says, we're going to go to this little hotel in Puebla. It's a very little place, you know, just your mom and the 3 of you. And I remember my mother being very quiet, you know, all during the trip. We got to this little hotel. It was called Suites del Ángel. I remember the name very well. It was was probably the fanciest hotel I ever been to. It was small, but you know the rooms were like suites. It was like a little house, and had a great little swimming pool and all that. And then my mother got on the phone. And all of a sudden, I started noticing my mother was saying terrible things about my father. And I stopped. And she just said, well, you might as well find out. Your father's just left us, just abandoned us. The breakup of my parents, it was a shattering. It was a complete shattering. It came to me as a complete surprise. I had no inkling whatsoever, no suspicion that it was going to happen until my mother told me it happened. Afterwards, we went to the swimming pool. I didn't want to get into the pool. I remember the sun being really hot, getting sunburned, the water, everything seemed like really bright. That is the first time I remember knowing what depression was, being completely sad.
One day in April of 1974, when I was 4 years old, my father came for one of his visits, and the plan was that he would take me to the Vigeland Park, which is a sculpture park here in Oslo. And the plan was that my father and I would spend a few hours there and have some fun outdoors. It was in April, so the weather was getting a little bit better. And he instead took me to the airport, and we boarded a flight to New York. But I remember wondering where Mom was, and eventually I started to cry and say, you know, I want Mommy too. My father's primary tool in changing my own perception of my mother is, I think the most important thing is time alone, just time. In a little child's mind or a little child's perceptions, I mean, just time alone made it so that the images of my mom, just my mother's face, faded away.
During this time in Oregon, where my father had access to my younger brother and myself, I'd say the build-up to these visitations was a key period for my mother to try and turn us against my father. The way I look back on it is that we were being treated not as developing human beings, but as weapons of emotional assault. Would say it was difficult to understand at that age what was going on. And probably, yeah, I would say I blamed him. I've been taught to blame him. My mother and grandmother said he was going to kill us. I clearly remember my grandmother asking me if I wanted to move to Scotland to get away from my father. And I said I did. And very shortly after that, I packed stuff into a car and drove to, I think it was Vancouver. Remember, it was Vancouver. I flew from Vancouver. That was just like a game. Just like a game. Although at the time I stated I was in favour of this move, I now know that what happened was that I was abducted by my mother for the purpose of preventing me ever seeing my father again.
It was really, really, I like to go back to this word, secure. It was a secure world, which was completely shattered afterwards. This is Colonia Regacion, and 6 months after we moved into this house, number 142, my parents split up. Once it became definite that my parents were not going to get together, my father wasn't coming back. And all of a sudden, I started noticing my mother was saying terrible things about my father. I was standing right next to my mother. We were all in my mother's bedroom when my father called. But at one moment, my mother just stormed up from the dresser, walked over, grabbed the phone, and says, "You are not coming to this house. You have no right to eat because you don't have a right to see their children because you've abandoned them," and hung up. After hearing that conversation, I kind of knew things were in really bad shape. She really wanted to punish him by having us not wanting to see him. My mother just got on this campaign to satanize him. And we were used as weapons by my mother to get back at my father.
We got to New York, and I don't remember too much about when we first arrived, what that was like or anything, but I remember just this hazy feeling of feeling really like, where are we? What's going on? Where's Mom? Like, something really didn't feel so right, but I don't remember too much about that. But I remember I kept asking my father where Mom is, and I trusted my dad, so I believed what he told me, and he kept saying, she'll come, she'll come. Then eventually he told me that, she's not coming because she really doesn't really want to come and see you anymore. We traveled around for 10 years. The most we stayed in one place was maybe 6 months, if that long. I couldn't talk about my mother at all with my father during any of that time, basically. He'd freeze up or get very angry or do something kind of scary, like throw something on the floor or just get really, really, really angry and really tense. So I couldn't say the M word. I mean, that was Mom, or Mother. I couldn't bring it up, and it was frightening. And it reinforced her scariness to me, or it felt, so she was the cause of that fear. It was her fault that my father would get angry and withdrawn. So it wasn't his fault, it became her fault in my mind. It was very frightening to talk about my mother.
We landed at Prestwick Airport and travelled to Edinburgh, returning to a bed and breakfast where we'd stayed the year before on holiday. On arrival here, the approach was this was the start of a new life. In a way, my mother's very own year zero. What had gone on before was not to be talked about. This was a new life. We were basically to be new people. We were Scottish now. if discussed, we were here to get away from a really bad man. I'd been taught to be afraid of my father at that point. So as a child, I believed what I was being told. I was voicing the views of my mother and grandmother that had been fed to me. You know, I took that in, believed it, and expressed myself in those terms. If I'd been asked a question about what my idea of what a father is at the time, I would have said someone who I've left behind 6,000 miles away, who I'm not supposed to talk about, who wanted to kill me. Within a year of being brought to Scotland, my father came over here to try and get access to visit me and my brother. He turned up at our door where we were living in Portobello, on the east side of Edinburgh. My grandmother bundled me and my brother out of the house, and we ended up out here at Seat and Sands Caravan Park. This was treated as a hideaway during the period where my father was trying to gain access to us through the Scottish court system. I guess it was another aspect of the game at the time. Unless we've got to hide from him, he's here. The bad guy's here.
She figured the best way to punish him was okay, you have no right to see your children anymore. You know, since you abandoned them, you got to pay the price. You can't see your children anymore. She couldn't physically keep us because I guess the courts wouldn't allow her because there were visitation rights and all that from seeing him. She wanted us to resent our father to the point that we wouldn't want to see him anymore. We wouldn't do that because we still wanted to see our father and all that. My mother upped the tactics to keep my father from seeing us. She used every legal recourse she had to make it very difficult for him to stay in Mexico. The courts ordered that every time he wanted to go out of the country, he had to get a special permit from the Department of Foreign States. It made it really, really impossible, really, really difficult. Finally, my father said, you know, I'm getting out of the country. I cannot sustain this anymore. And that way, keeping him out of their lives, okay, you made your choice, you got to pay the price. You won't get to see your children anymore. And you know, regardless of what that meant to us.
I don't really remember clearly when I was given my new name or another name, which was Sarah. I just know that I always knew that my name used to be Cecilia, but that now it was going to be Sarah. That was all about my new life and the person that I was becoming. When I think of my childhood, I think of New York in many ways. It was kind of the home base, even though we traveled a lot over the next years. We lived there for the first 2 years after I was abducted, and then kind of constantly came back there after being away for a few weeks or months at a time. Just I craved so much to be with normal families, or you know, with other kids, with mothers, with other dads. And you know, there was a big emptiness inside me, and I was a little kid who was being torn apart by this situation. When I was 6 years old, my mother found us again, and a court case was started. My father and I went off into the night. Yeah, my father and I just were kind of wanderers. I mean, I didn't go to school very much. We traveled through 34 of the 50 states. Really didn't have a home all those years. And then there were all kinds of subtle and not so subtle messages. Messages that my mother, she was a bad person who did bad things and hung around with bad people, and I had this black, dark image in my head of this really bad person. I didn't see my mom again for another 12 years after that.
In starting school here as an American in Scotland, was not a pleasant experience. And was clearly an outsider for a long time, but made every effort to fit in. That was my strategy for surviving, was to fit in as quickly as possible. Later on, I was spending a lot of time outside the home. I saw basically involved in gangs. And one of the gangs I became part of eventually in my later teens was associated with Hibernian Football Club. Rival gangs used to come to Edinburgh, and me and my mates were involved in fighting with them. It was basically a drunk and a thug. The reason for bringing me over here, according to my mother and grandmother, was to get me away from my father, and it was someone to be feared. And as I became older and they were less able to control me, they said I was my father, and I was going to be just like my father. They had systematically described this person as a bad person, as a monster. And I was now becoming that monster.
During that period, between 10 and 16, when I didn't see my father, the 6 years, I wouldn't even consider asking my mother for permission to go visit my father. I was afraid of the way she might react, be angry with me, or say something like, you know, well, you can go, and why don't you just go live with your father then, or whatever, you know. He's trying to impress you with all his money, but he's the one that walked out on you, remember, and I'm the one here, you know, working. And it was that kind of manipulation that she always used. To an extent, I feel that my mother was expressing her own needs through me in terms of, you know, venting her anger. My mother really did get to my father by keeping us away from him, but she also hurt us, and she hurt herself. So there are no winners in this situation. There really are no winners. As an adult, the separation from my father has affected me, I believe, and mostly a lack of self-esteem, a lack of trust. Here I am, I've just turned 43, I'm still not married, not in a meaningful relationship. I just put barriers. I just don't trust him. It has affected our lives as adults. You see, you know, I'd rather, you know, sometimes you wish they hadn't had you. You know, you'd rather not be here. My mother created a situation which damaged us for the rest of our lives.
It was very difficult at times to feel like a part of this person who'd been painted to be so evil or destructive. But somehow Norway was just sort of a blank spot on the map, or it was a place that I didn't want to go to, you know, just because of everything I'd been told about my mom and my Norwegian family. I think back to that little kid and I feel so much pain. Even the fact that I had one perception of my father and his role in my life and how selfless he had been, and how, you know, for years I thought how he put his child first, and he did all this for my sake, to protect me against this terrible mother. And then when that started changing, it just really screwed with my whole outlook on life and my own trust in my own perceptions in life. It led to a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety, I have trouble sleeping. I have nightmares sometimes. It's caused a tremendous amount of upheaval and pain.
As the years went on, when I was a teenager, I tried to eliminate anything that would give my past away as being American. I would certainly not tell anyone about it. And to this day, there's probably the majority of people I know nothing of this story. I would say the long-term effects of this for me, the enduring effects, there's still a self-doubt that can be crippling at times. You know, lack of confidence. And an enduring sense of being an outsider. My mother dished out a 20-year sentence to my father. One that had consequences for all of us. And I think now she's maybe realising that the consequences of her actions are inescapable. Although I'm in contact with my father, he basically still is a stranger, and I've cut off all contact with my mother.
Well, dear viewers, this is Mr. X. I don't want to say I hope you enjoyed the documentary, but I hope you learned something. Every case is different, and there's so many families out there that are suffering from parental alienation or child abduction by the other parent, and it just doesn't impact those people. It impacts our courts, our society, jobs, finances, starting other families, and it carries on to those people's kids. There's a need for a big change in most of the Western worlds. I haven't been able to find anything in the eastern side of the world or the Middle East as of yet. I would love to have stories from there. I would love to get information because if that stuff's happening over there in the Middle East, Eurasia, or the East, it needs to change. It Kids need both their parents. Now, I'm not saying if the one parent is a complete piece of shit and abusive, they should not be in that child's life at all. But if both parents are commingling or decent and not abusive to the children or each other, they should be able to raise those kids together. If you can't be an adult when you have kids, you shouldn't have kids at all. They're not playthings. They're human beings that are going to impact society in the future, be it good or bad. So, again, if you guys want to follow us, facebook.com/justice00045. That's 3 zeros. Twitch TV, twitch.tv/alienization81, and on YouTube. I definitely have to change that name. I haven't figured that out. If you guys want to donate, don't have to. I purely do this out of altruism. You can donate to alienization816@gmail.com at PayPal. Realistically, any money I would get, I probably wouldn't use it on myself. I probably would try to find a charity or something like that. So, I honestly think that would be the best thing. Is I'm not here to make money. Yeah, it would be great, but it would be greater to help these families out and get parents to be able to see their kids and not have them be traumatized. If you want to comment on the live stream, go to streamyard.com/Facebook and you can comment. I do know that is for Facebook. I do know I do get comments from YouTube without any of that or Twitch. So if I know, here's one of our resources from one of the last shows. There's another one. Here's another one. And if you want to email us, you can email us at alienization816@gmail.com. Here's another resource here that we went over. Some more. Parental alienation support. And if you guys would like to listen to my podcast, it is called Secrets Untold. You can find it on any podcast directory that you have, any of the major ones. I'm not on iHeartMedia as of yet. I am working on that. That is about parental alienation, the true stories there. If you would like to send me your stories, you can send me your stories to secretsuntold29@gmail.com, and they could be written out. And if it's not a very big file, I think like the max for an email is 25 megabytes. You can send a recording and I can put it on the show. Recordings definitely work better than synthesized voice because I can play with the inflections in your voice and draw the audience in to understanding your story and your plight. And it gets your story out there. And maybe somebody that's listening can help you. And if it is too big to fit on email, you can use WeTransfer and send that over to the email of secretsuntold29@gmail.com. There's a few episodes. I'm going to say I got like 12. I've lost count. It's just, it's a hard subject. It's dealing with kids. I really thought about starting another one for missing people, but I really don't know where to start with that. And then getting all the information to make it viewable and informative. And I also know, if you're in some of the groups that I share this video with, I did put a link saying I wanted to do something crazy about I wanted to do something crazy, and I put the stories that me and my friends were working on. It's a murder mystery, kind of like in the Victorian age. And we've been stuck on it for a while, trying to get stuff going, and I figured, why not make it fun? Let you guys add on to it, and I can make it into a full audio cast. And I'm meaning full dramatized music, audio, different voices, stuff like that. It would be amazing, and it's completely free. And I definitely would put that out for you guys. But I'm yammering on, and I need to go make sure my Clum babies are in bed. And you guys keep your heads up, and if you get to that deep dark place, call someone. You're worth it. Even though there's billions of us on this planet, your life still matters, no matter what. Someone cares about you.
My greatest moments didn't come from my greatest moments. My greatest moments came from my greatest defeat.